Welcome to the Zero Trust Journey podcast, created by cybersecurity practitioners for those walking the same path. We share real stories, hard lessons, and hard-won victories from the field, so you can sidestep the pitfalls and deliver the wins. Grab your coffee, tune out the buzzwords, and let's get into the real story right here on the Zero Trust Journey podcast.
Welcome to the Zero Trust Journey podcast. My name is Victor Monga. I am your host and producer of the show. We bring experts who are seasoned in this topic, Zero Trust, cybersecurity, and industry as well. Today, we are joined by Jamie Fitz-Gerald, a highly experienced product management leader with a career that spans across major technology and defense companies. Jamie, you've been a great friend and a mentor to me. I wanted to bring you here on this podcast and talk about Zero Trust. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. This is really exciting and a long time coming.
Yeah. So just for my audience, Jamie is currently the VP of Product Management at Okta, focusing on access management, devices, security, and risk. Prior to joining Okta, Jamie spent over 10 years at Palo Alto Networks. Very exciting, Jamie, by the way. And started career with roles at Raytheon and Lockheed Martin. We're very excited to dive into the core of the Zero Trust journey with you, Jamie.
Yeah, I'm excited as well. No, it's always exciting and humbling to hear that and that story. And obviously, it's been a journey and exciting to kind of walk through all of that. And I look forward to just chatting about the journey and anything I can offer and add to all the listeners.
I involved software engineering at Lockheed Martin and a software section manager role at Raytheon. So from there, you became product manager. Let's talk about in those high assurance environments. How did the need for system integrity and precise control initially shape your thinking about implicit trust versus explicit verification? Because I know when you are in the SDLC lifecycle, the mindset is different. It's to make sure the product works, the software works. So what shaped your anchoring decision that I want to make sure that it's implicit trust versus explicit verification?
Specifically in the defense world, there's very little trust, right? I think in probably the best way possible. But it's funny because, as in my career, I've seen different approaches and, different rigor in the journey of zero trust or software development lifecycle or
Sure.
all the above. For me, when I go back to those days, the development I was doing required me to be in a disconnected laboratory that required you to go through a padlock on a door to get into the room. So that's the level of distrust we had, let alone the fact that you had to have a government security clearance so that vet who you are and what access you should have access to, and then physically put you in rooms where you could no longer possibly have access. So that's the most extreme in certain ways of lack of implicit trust. You must go through a certain level of journeys. Now, there's always this concept of zero trust. If you think about it, for me to even be able to have access to the code to get into that room meant a following set of roots of trust. And you'll see that throughout the entire journey, everything always comes back to certain levels of roots of trust.
Sure.
Now, that root might start from a higher bar, but at some point, for me to be able to badge into the building, go into the room, have the clearance level that I had to have to physically have the access to the code to the door, meant that I had to go through different gates and bars throughout all of that. And there was a recertification to get you back there.
Exactly. And I was gonna reel back to the motivation of that, right? So you had to go through the background check, you had to have a physical badge on you, visible badge on you. There's a security person who's making sure that you're walking in. Then there's a padlock, all of those things, right? What's the motivation? Because that's what, when we talk about zero trust, and a lot of leaders, they ask, what is my motivation? Why do I actually anchor my cybersecurity strategy with zero trust? What is there? You have least privilege, you have separation of duty, all of that. But those are, in my book, they are aspects of zero trust. Zero trust is the strategy. Zero trust is the anchor that you drop in. So what's the motivation? Why did you have to go through all of those security checks to get to your terminal where you can actually create software?
Well, I guess I like to say, just to echo what you just said, you can't buy zero trust. It's not a product, right? It's a mindset. It's a philosophy. It's a way of thinking. And I think at any given point, it's thinking of risk, right? At any given moment, you're questioning, what would it take for someone to get access to the information or data or whatever resource that you're trying to get access to. And you start to ask those questions, and then you work backwards. And now it depends on how risky is the thing that you're trying to get access to, and therefore how much am I willing to raise that bar? So from a philosophical perspective, I'm questioning why not just have a padlock on the door? Well, what if I could get that? What if I could figure well,
Right.
why not just have clearance?
Adding that layers is important.
Exactly. So I think this layered approach is very, very key in the philosophical approach towards zero trust. And therefore, whenever I get a chance to talk to somebody that's in this world or asking questions of what should I be thinking about, I actually do start with what is the crown jewel? What are you trying to protect? Now, what would it take to get there? Oh, well, I have to get into this room. Okay, well, what can you do to hope that? Okay, well, who should have access to that? Well, only these people. Why should only those people? Oh, because they have access to this project. Well, what do I know about that person? And then you talked about the parallels get so interesting. You talked about least privilege, and you talk about no standing privilege. All those stories are just different tools towards the same mindset and a different approach, which is start with the thing that you're most concerned about protecting and working backwards from that.
And that's the theme as well, right? It's not if, it's when, because if you start working backwards from there, you're like, well, I am going to get breached, or maybe I have already, but what can I do to slow it down? What can I do to minimize that blast radius? What can I do to make sure I prevent that today and continue working towards that reiteration as well? Again, to your point, and I think you were alluding to that as well, where zero trust is not something that you can buy today and off you go. It's a strategy that you will be reiterating, cushioning that your current controls are working, current policies are working, current people inside a threat every day in the news, right? So we keep talking about that. So we keep going back to what we have today. Is it enough? And that's a question, I think, from a zero trust strategy perspective. Is it enough? And that pillars guide you towards wherever you are the weakest. Let's work on towards that. So, Jamie, I know your education, when I was looking at it, you have masters in electrical and computer engineering, focusing on computer architecture. So let me ask this. How does the discipline of designing complex systems translate to zero trust principle of securing every connection, even those deep inside the environments? Would electrical computer engineering guided you towards that, or some of that still works towards zero trust principles?
I feel like a lot of my education was about understanding complex systems and understanding that it wasn't direct. I didn't think, oh man, this directly translates to zero trust. But when you think about the principles of how these things work, it all kind of comes back to similar concepts. So let's talk about a complex system. Complex systems cannot be fragile. They must have multiple different control points. They have to have failure mechanisms. They have to have failover mechanisms. Like the most complex, the more the system and the more mission critical that system is built for, the more different types of controls and failure mechanisms you have to have in place. So when you parallel that and you put it back towards thinking about zero trust as an example, let's talk about, like you called it out as, imagine that someone breaks through one level of your controls. You must, like you talked about, assuming that you've been breached. Well, there's, in general, in a complex system, assume something didn't happen as planned. Assume that a message got disrupted. Assume that something got messed up. What would you do? How do you fail over? How do you recover from that? And again, and what recover means in a zero trust world is making sure that you secure the outcome of where you're trying to go, versus the outcome perhaps of a complex computer system might be, I need to, recover from a message, or do a retry, or slow down my connection to get towards the outcome that I want. But each one of those things is going towards an ultimate goal, which is
Right.
some output or outcome. And in our case, from a security practitioner perspective, it is ensure that the right folks have access to the right resources at the right time, and only that. And that's it. And it's a similar concept.
Validate this for me. When I consulted for the government, they used to have a concept called 1-point failure, 2-point failure, 3-point failure, which means is if I have this complex architecture, I can survive 1-point failure, which means one firewall is down, one server is down, one switch is down, one router is down, one load balancer is down. I can survive. 2-point failure, I can have two multiple parallel things down, and I'm still environment is still working, mission critical work is still going on. So I have 2-point failures, which mean I have to architect accordingly. And 3-point failures was the hardest. You can have 3 things in your architecture down concurrently, which means one server, one firewall, maybe one router, one load balancer, one switch, whatever that is. And now you design it accordingly. I think you were talking about similarly in the complex system environment when it comes to like having those objects, you got to think about it. What's your risk appetite? How far can you take it? And then 1, 2, 3-point failures really guide you. How much can you survive if something has happened? And now flip the script to adversaries. If they are in my web server, if they are in my DMZ, if they are in my this segment, how far can they go? What damage can they make? I think that's where I'm trying to relate the analogy here.
No, I love it. And so the answer is yes, and fully aligned with the approach and even the way that the terminology. I think when you break it down to like what's enough, I think that's it's a very difficult question to answer for many organizations. And I would tell you, I work at a company called Okta, and we very publicly went through some security incidents that are very well documented, so nothing proprietary here. But when we looked at those and you look in retrospect, like, would we have changed things? The answer is yes. And we did change things. We changed many different things, learning from security incidents. And so I think the challenge becomes, do you wait until you feel like you were too soft, or do you take the approach of 2-point failure, 3-point failure, 1-point failure? It depends on the risk. Your appetite for what can happen if you get compromised, or if someone gets access to the data that you don't want them to have access to, etc. And I think that is the key.
And here's the worst, I think, when you ask that question from an executive or leader that, hey, what's my risk appetite? How far can you take it? To your point, how far can it happen? And at that point is enough. And they will say, well, I want everything online, 100%, no hacks, no problems at all times. And I think that's the worst approach, worst statement that you can, from a strategy or vision perspective, because that's not practical. Right. Even the big companies like AWS are having outages. Do you really think their executives are saying that, well, I must have 100% online? But that doesn't work that way. So like bringing it down to the actionable level, I think that's what the best leader can guide. Where, okay, based on my resources, based on my company size, based on what we do, based on the budget, what can we do? How far can we take it? And then whatever is the remainder that goes into your BCP DRP, and then you communicate back to your executives like, well, this is what my point of objective, this is my recovery objective, and that's what I can do because based on my resources and budget.
I'll make a very like kind of maybe controversial statement, right? Which is like, I've been working in cybersecurity for the majority of my career, and like if I made the claim that my job is to stop all attacks, full stop, it's a pretty high bar, right? And so, in other words, my job is to increase the effort level of an adversary to get towards the resources, right? The more hurdles, the harder the resistance is, the more likely they are to move on. Again, to your point, you always must assume that depending on if you're a government entity, like there's advanced persistent threats that are coming after you, financial institutions, large organizations, technology companies, like tools are so important that you really, really, really have to put in more and more different levels of resistance. Yeah. Will they ever be perfect? Probably not. And so you must assume not, and therefore you must assume, how can I make it even harder? How can I rotate things? How can I recover from a situation where I might have lost the battle? And so I think putting on that hat is probably the most extreme. But I think that let's put it this way. I think it's more of almost a philosophical debate in certain ways. And the reason why I say that is, however, almost always you'll talk to organizations who have certain resources in place. They have an Okta, they have a Palo Alto Networks, they have these security products that have been purchased, but are they properly deployed? Are you even using them to the levels that you could?
Effectiveness.
Today, effectiveness with your deployment actually is, to me, the area where it's frustrating for most organizations when they realize, I could have stopped that. If you do a retro and you realize you could have, but you didn't because you didn't put a control in place. I think that's where the first questions I would ask a leader is to say, number one, within the budget and constraints that you have, are you using everything to the nth level of what they could actually provide to you? And then ask yourself, what is still at risk? What am I still exposed to? Because there will be answers to those questions.
It's funny you mentioned effectiveness. I had Snehal Antani, CEO and founder of Horizon 3, and we went on the same debate as well, effectiveness. And after that, we concluded two things. One, asset inventory. Still basic, still fundamental, still number one. If you don't know your hardware, software, your people, it's just, you got to start there. I'm not saying you're a bad leader. I'm not saying you're a bad executive. I'm just saying you got to start there. Know your people, know their skills, know their strengths, know their weaknesses, know your hardware, know your software, know your assets. So that's number one. Number two is effectiveness. Just because you have the best security tools, just because you have the best policies created, just because you have the best processes created, just because you have the intention to follow the right standards and the baselines and the guidelines is not enough. Know your effectiveness. Continuously test that effectiveness because things change. Just like in life, digital life is very fast growing. So things change. So know your effectiveness, tie it back to the assets, which are crown jewels, and keep like adding those layers as we talked about, the resistance, and have some notion of reality where it's going to happen one day. And be ready. Practice that almost in your head every day in front of the mirror if you have to. You're going to get that phone call. How are you going to react? What's your next steps? So
100%. And we have, I mean, and a lot of the largest organizations that I've worked with, not only practice it in their head, they actually practice it. Like they go
drills,
through,
right? You got to go through the drill.
Real drills.
Yeah.
This is what happens. We have comms plans. We have reaction plans. There's a blast radius containment. Like it's almost like an oil spill. What would you do? This is what you would do. This is how you'd roll with it. This is what would happen. And if folks aren't planning for those things, then it's the worst case scenario. You always must be thinking about and planning for the worst case scenario. And when you do that, it allows you to think different. The key point of all of this is, how can you think different? How can you assume that someone is coming for you? Someone is trying to take your data. Someone's broken through your first layer of defense. Like when you start to think different, then you start thinking about, how could I contain this particular attack method or blast radius or what have you? And I think it becomes an ongoing, lifelong journey because humans are involved. And at the end of the day, humans are involved, which means that someone could break that policy on accident. Sometimes it's not even on purpose. It's an accident. I guarantee the latest outage of an AWS probably was an accident. No one did it on purpose per se.
And nobody wants to, right? Like who wants to be blamed for that? Who wants to be like responsible for that? Everybody's trying to do the job.
Right. And again, and adversaries are trying to break, right? I mean, so I think the interesting part is that you're you're fighting against all the different human emotions and attributes, right? Like what is the actions? What's the motivation of an adversary? Those things become interesting as well. Is it money? Is it power? Is it political? Like
influence,
these are really interesting stories, right? Right. And I think that means that you probably will approach different, again, resistance levels based on who is probably attacking you and why. So then it kind of really shifts you into that world view as well. It's like
self-realization.
Right? Yeah.
Where you are, who's coming after you, and then exactly back to assets, people, and your effectiveness. So Jamie, I would say 2 decades ago, if we were having this conversation, you would say that network is the most important choke point because most of the things were on-prem. People used to come inside the offices, and you would say, and again, I'm the same way. I started my journey in the network engineering world. So I would say network was always the most important. And I used to joke with the system guys that, hey, the bad guys cannot hide from network. At the end of the day, they got to come through the front door. That's network. They got to leave through that some back door or some way. They cannot hide from the network. But that's not true anymore. With the proliferation after COVID, everybody's working remotely. SaaS blew out. Like every company at this point is using SaaS. They know, or maybe they don't. They are using it.
Yep.
So identity becomes the new perimeter. We hear these over and over again. You have worked for companies. They are very network security focused. Now you're working for a company which is a lot more identity focused, and part of your role as a leader at Okta, you manage access management and devices management. So why is identity now the most robust core control point? I get the answer from different people, different version of it, but I want to hear from you as well. Because when it comes to zero trust strategy, I think 99.9 conversations start and revolve around identity. Yes, microsegmentation network is there, continuous verification is there, application data is there, but identity has always been the, I would say, sensitive and yet important key piece of it.
Yeah, I mean, so I echo everything you just said. And now, if I jump too quickly as possible, why identity? Why is it so important? Like, a couple of different things. Number one, what's interesting about endpoint and network is you could be on network, you could be off network, you could be on a managed device or off a managed device, but identity is actually ubiquitously deployed. Like, there's one gate into your SaaS apps. There's one gate into your resources, and it's identity. The reason why we talk about it as being the perimeter is truthfully the if you tried to bypass every other control, at least at minimum, we're probably the last gate or only gate in some cases to getting into the resources that the adversaries are trying to
And
get
attackers
to.
are not breaking in, they're logging in. That's another meme I'll flash it here.
Yeah, it's no doubt. So if you think about that, then there's a couple different things that I think are important. Number one, if you can't get identity right, you can't get security right. It's not possible. You can't do it. So you should start with first principles. First things first, getting identity right. Thinking about phishing resistant MFA as part of your authentication flows. Thinking about least privilege, right? Thinking about governing who has access to what resources. Those are core principles. And zero trust, in my mind, should start with first things first. I said, if you think about your biggest, most, risky assets, what's the first thing you have to think about? Well, who has access to them? How do they get access to them? I mean, these are basic questions.
And over provisioning
identity
is a serious problem for enterprises because a lot of people join different teams and they move from different teams, and it's just nobody's looking at like what access do you have, what you used to have, do you still need it? That verification is hard for enterprises. I know a lot of platforms, including Okta, helps enterprises, but that again, identity becomes the center core piece of it. Who can access my applications?
Absolutely. And being the central and perhaps only gate into the resources means that we unlock the world, right? I mean, BYOD, like these organizations, again, when you think about zero trust, like we talked about the hard part. The hard part is balancing business need, productivity, and security. Like that's the balance, right? At any given moment, you're actually asking yourself, like, do I need to put a padlock on every single door of every single room to have access? Like, probably not, unless you're DoD working on those types of things.
Right.
So then,
and it's not practical. Yeah.
And it's not practical. But can I let Dr. Victor bring his own personal laptop or phone or not? Those are a different set of questions depending on the risk that you have access to what data and how.
Totally.
And so that's where again, identity becomes a key part of both of those conversations and allows you to think about over provisioning, like productivity and balancing those different things. But again, always coming back to that.
Speaking of productivity, again, I think managing identity as a program, it helps actually just-in-time access. So I don't have to wait for IT to provision my access to do something that this actually helps me as an end user to work for my company effectively and efficiently because my access is correct to exactly where I need to be, where I need to do, and I don't have to wait for anything else. So I think that also back to the productivity. So Jamie, let's wrap with this one. If you were to go back 10, 20, 30 years, what's the one thing you'll change knowing where we are today in the world and keeping zero trust strategy? If you forgot everything, just kept one thing in your memory, that zero trust, 30 years ago, what would you change in the world, in cybersecurity, in you, in products that you built? What's the one thing you would say that I wish I've started that early?
Yeah, I mean, I would actually go back and just think about how devices and identity are actually so tightly aligned. And I think that I think the reality is that because we're going back that far, it's tricky because I would have said make passwordless, and I mean I could try to like make up a lot of different interesting stories, but the truth is that the technology wasn't always there, right? Like, and I think the other part of this is that the bar moves. Like it wasn't that long ago that it was very difficult to have your phone look at your face and know it was you, right? So like that level of technology means that we could do different things. But if you go back to even back in those days, it's like, how can I tie network endpoint identity together? those three things at minimum are the ways that like there are certain ways that we can do those things together to help raise the bar so that I think I know who you are. I'm pretty sure I know what device you're coming from, and I know where you're coming from a network perspective. If you just take those core principles and try to cascade them to the next set of technology, the next set of technology, the next set of technology, that's the evolution that we've been going
100%.
through. And I guess I didn't always have that like clarity back in those days that I now have.
Well, you're definitely helping us. Jamie, thanks so much for being on the show. Really good, raw conversation, I think, for our audience, and I'm sure everybody's loving it. So once again,
Awesome.
thank you so much for being on the Zero Trust Journey podcast. And thank you, everyone, for listening to us today. Please subscribe to ztjourney.com. You can hear about our events and all the raffle stuff we've been doing. Jamie, once again, always a pleasure.
Yeah, same to you. Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
That's a wrap on this Zero Trust journey. Now it's your turn. Step into the spotlight, share your story, and be part of the journey. Subscribe to Zero Trust Journey on LinkedIn for the latest news, events, and giveaways. Until next time.